Hi, hello, welcome. So today we're going to be talking about recent crypto hacks and the security lessons behind them. So every hack tells a story, not a fun story usually, but a story. And so when one of these incidents makes the news, I think the first thing a lot of people think about is how much money was involved or lost, how much was stolen. And like, I get it, that's understandable. But I think a more interesting question is what actually happened. And even more interesting, once we figure out what failed, what can we learn from this? And how can we avoid the mistake again? Because as we'll talk about, a lot of these hacks happen over and over again. So they're not new. They're new to whatever protocol or wallet, but they're not a new form of attack generally. Or sometimes it's actually the same attack over and over again on the same wallet or protocol, and there's not a learning happening. But anyways, we're going to look at some recent incidents, just the last few months, and there are plenty. We probably won't get to them all. I'm Jessica Levesque. I'm C4's executive director, and we have an incredible panel today to talk about recent hacks and map it to the CCSS a bit, but the focus is more on what went wrong and what we can improve. So let's do introductions. Roman, you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. Hello, and thanks for having me. I'm Roman from Germany. A DLT enterprise architect at Halborn. Before that, been in IT for 20 years, 10 of which since 2016 in DLT. I've been through everything there was, all the hypes. So yeah, happy to be here.
Great. Thank you so much. Ani?
Yeah. Hello, guys. I'm Ani. I run a CCSS focused security firm called +91 Security. We do readiness assessments for CCSS and full audits. And for fun, I post about it on LinkedIn.
For fun. Yeah. LinkedIn being fun. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Val?
Hey, yes, I'm Valentyn, working for Forgenix currently, mainly in payment security and compliance, more like a Web 2 space, let's say, the PCI stuff, and all about the, payment security controls, of course, in the CCSS, quite new, but also been recently got my auditor and implementer certification. So yeah, happy to be here and talk about the hacks.
Awesome. All right, Dave?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Dave Schwed. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Sovereign. Previously, I was CISO over Robinhood, supporting their brokerage and money and banking businesses, Chief Operating Officer for Halborn, Global Head of Digital Assets Technology for BNY Mellon, and last but not least, Chief Security Officer for Galaxy Digital, the better one. Over to you, Ethan.
That's a great segue to Ethan.
I have a consulting business, Next Encrypt. I do fractional chief information security officer work. In the past, I've done work for places like Citadel Securities, Bank of New York Mellon. I was chief information security officer over at Galaxy, longer than Schwed was, I'll say that. And yeah, been around broader finance and information security for quite a bit longer than that even.
Make everything a competition. That's like totally in my nature, so I'm fine with that. Okay, so there have been a lot of hacks in the last few months. It's interesting when, we were looking this up and doing the agenda and trying to figure out which hacks to cover, there were a lot to try to pick from. Some there's a lot of information on, and some there's less information on. So we're going to try to go through and we'll share what has publicly been shared, what we know. No one on this call is an expert on every single hack that has happened, because that would be probably impossible to know. But we all know some or a lot about the different ones we'll talk about. So let's get into some of these. I feel like, so for those on the call, we've got an agenda, a list, but we're going to jump around based on what makes sense for the conversation. We're going to be fluid. But one of the things that I think that most people are aware of recently, one of the big ones that has happened is the drift protocol. And that was in April. And I think that's a good one to start with because most people have heard about it. So if you're in Web3, you probably know about this. It happened in April. And while we're not going to focus on the price, I do think that it would be, I guess, misleading to pretend like there wasn't money involved, because there obviously was. For Drift, there was about $285 million lost. And this is an important one because it's linked to DPRK. And a lot of things were going on that led to this. So does anyone want to explain in their words what happened with Drift Protocol? If not, I'll do a rundown. But is there anyone on the call that's like itching to get into what exactly went down with this?
Yeah, I can give a little bit of overview of what actually happened and what went through. So first of all, Drift Protocol was a DEX on Solana, and they were contacted by a group, and that group posed as a quant trading firm, and they wanted to invest in their protocol. And this group, as we know, was related to North Korea. But yeah, so they approached this protocol. They were like, okay, we want to invest. We have $1 million of funding. We are going to use it up on your protocol. We want to do a collaboration of some sorts. We are going to build infrastructure. We are going to do this, that. They surprisingly, they visited conferences. They visited them in their offices, I think so too. But it was just a 6-month long wooing phase, so as to call it, where they were just trying to get trust, get some proof of that they are good people at heart, right? But because they had a 6-month collab with the protocol security council overlooked a transaction that they were trying to sign. The group, the attackers, gave the security council a transaction, and the security council blindly signed that transaction. Honestly, the purpose of a security council is to maybe not sign transactions blindly, but because they had a collab going on, they did that, and that transaction was basically giving them admin privileges. After that, it was pretty simple. Like, actually, they did a lot of DeFi stuff too, like smart contract exploits. They were doing Oracle manipulation on the side, so that when they got access to the Drift protocol, they could onboard a fake collateral and then borrow against that fake collateral real assets. And yeah, then you just launder those assets and they are traced back to North Korea.
Got it. Does anyone want to add in or fill in the details at all for anything that you think is important before we discuss it? Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and not details, but I think like the level of sophistication on the social engineering side, as he mentioned, I think was in some cases, I guess, unprecedented as far as the amount of time, the level of in-person, which I think this was the first time that, allegedly that we've encountered in-person social engineering versus the typical LinkedIn, Zoom interviews from a social engineering perspective. So now this is escalating to in real life social engineering.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, we talk about social engineering, but that is definitely like a new factor. And it's kind of, I think, especially interesting when we're focusing so much on like AI and deep fakes and things happening online, to then take it the other direction and to do it that way. And just the level of, like you said, the level of sophistication with the social engineering and the time. So this was over 6 months, but the planning must have started quite a bit before that as well. So this isn't like casual, you walk into a store and you're like, oh, I really want that Coke and I don't have any money. This is like, in 6 months, I'm going to really want to go grab a bottle of Coca-Cola. So let me plan how I'm going to do this for a really long time. But it's surprised the bottle of soda is worth almost, $285 million.
I mean, that's a really good point for as a takeaway for organizations, is like, this was a 6-month or if not longer op, and you could be in the middle of it right now. Any organization that's listening, so any of your trusted vendors, partners, consultants, even employees that are working for you or with you, it could be another Drift situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the governance and risk side of it and not being aware while this is happening, focusing on other things. And this is going on like right under your nose, basically. And it's pretty scary, actually. When you talk about it, it's like, oh God, when you said that, it's like, yeah, it could be happening right now, or waiting to happen. So what do we do about this? Or anything else anyone wants to add? Go ahead, Roman, Val, Ethan, everyone unmuted. So this is a good one. Jump on in.
Well, first of all, is training, right? As you already mentioned, AI, it makes things even more difficult, and now in person, so kind of you cannot trust anyone, right? So protocols like key manager, key operator trainings is a must. And from technical perspective, logging, for instance, and threat modeling, things like delayed execution for upgrades or granting admin roles, right? I think it's, I don't see it, let's say, often enough, even though it's so critical points and it's not so difficult to implement. I think those are the least, like the baseline, what I would do to prevent this kind of situations.
Yeah, in addition, maybe to say to all those guys that already, said everything about this situation. The scary part is that, like, if you look at the CCSS control or any other information security frameworks, it's like you will not see any direct controls. Of course, there is a third-party management and risk assessments and security awareness trainings, but like look at from the perspective of the standards and controls. There is no a single control that directly can prevent from this happening. Like if you under this kind of sophisticated attack, and then literally if you target by the group of smart people that wanted to steal your money, is very, very unlucky that you can resist. And it's basically, that's why you should have a layered security, right? So then you have a multiple controls, and starting with of course, the team and all the people in your company, like if they're educated enough, and then they constantly trained on the information security hacks, and literally all these scenarios when the people try to steal you, like literally like on the street, like offering some sort of things to you, and then you literally like giving everything to them. So but basically, yeah, the idea is to be always like aware that even your trusted partners, even the people around that you kind of trust, they might be already not just your partners, right? So that's the main thing to consider.
Maybe start off with a background check and an ID check as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you trust someone, just don't think that, okay, this guy is trusted because I know him like, okay, 6 months or so. He's a nice guy. I've met him. I've been in the conference. So these things shouldn't invalidate, the fact that you should like look at them as a kind of a new people or a new partners, and you always have to do these annual rechecks and confirm, yeah, I know those guys, and they looks trustworthy, and then just do all the controls that you require.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just like humans will always be the weakest link, right? So and in critical situations and critical paths, you always need to put gates to prevent or at least to delay any kind of action, because as you see, the attacks, as well said, they are getting more sophisticated. It might be like a heat wave, like it is today in Germany, and you just cannot think straight, right? And you just you do this error, and you sign something that you shouldn't. But if that happens for critical paths, you need to have like technical automated gates that prevent that lock, that delay execution, so that maybe someone else from your team can react and say, hey, why do we have here like admin change transaction in the queue about to be executed, right? So humans, I think there will always be errors. So no matter how good you protect or how many controls you invent and put into place, there will be always something and there will be always loopholes. And yeah.
Ethan?
Piece of this that's really important at almost the highest level is go into this if you've got that kind of amount of funds and assume that some of your controls are failing. Assume that at least some of them are breached at any given time. Think of it as like a percentage hit rate. And when you think about that for any security control that's complicated, think about even like basics like handling vulnerability or cloud posture management, those sorts of things. Nothing's ever perfect. And so try not to make those assumptions that that one thing you have is always working, is always functioning, unless you have a reason to really know. And then taking that like down a level from there, it's the human element. Like everyone's basically saying, um, there's things to really understand about how this stuff works. The fact that you've got the durable nonces, which means that you can sign something and it can last a lot longer. I know there's been a history with lots of complex wallet setups where you try to sign something, you get an error message. Well, does that mean that something actually got signed and stashed away somewhere? Does that mean something didn't actually go through? How do you know? And it's putting that through, like, what is really the process for how you're going to know what's going on? Because it's not always easy. There's kind of the simple happy path, but there's those little things add up, and things tend to go wrong, especially when you get those long-term or more persistent attacks.
Yeah, what's interesting is we're all talking about solutions to the problem, but if they were so easy, why aren't people implementing or projects implementing? And I think Jessica, I know this is why you brought me on the call, so rant incoming, but, I think part of the problem is security is not taken seriously by these organizations. They're treating these as projects, if you will, and not companies that are protecting people's wealth. This is, incredible amount of money in TVL that are locked up in these contracts. And they're effectively banks in some cases. Like it's the same from a similarity perspective. People are trusting these organizations with their funds, and they're not taking the same level of precautions that a bank is going to be taking. Understandably so, they don't have the same level of resources or budget. But on the flip side, I don't think that they're taking even like a small amount of some of the protections that they need to. One of the things that I always recommend people do is, and I do myself, is I go on LinkedIn, and everyone who's heard me talk, I say this over and over again. You go on LinkedIn, look up the project, type in security, and see how many full-time security folks are actually working at some of these projects. And you'll be shocked that there are projects with 50 to 100 people that have 0 security people. And what ends up happening is you have engineers who are technical, and they think that they don't need security people because it's just another subset of being technical. And they are trying to code away security. So as an example, like we're talking about time locks, and I agree that time lock is a great control. The problem is that the time lock has to be coded in. And then when you have engineers who have admin access to remove so like that's also part of like this threat vector is once you get in and you have the ability to do some recon on the environment and understand where are the controls set up. I have 6 months within your organization, 9 months sitting on your network to try to understand what are the controls that you have in place, what are the monitoring that you have in place. Let me piece everything together. Oh, okay, great. You have monitoring, but then I'll tack you at Saturday at 2 a.m. when the one person who gets the alerts is actually sleeping. So I know I'll have a 9-hour window in which to do something. So we really have to think through not just are the controls in place, but is security foundational to these organizations itself from a culture perspective? And they need to take it seriously as they do from building the products themselves. Rant over.
Well, I think that's such a good point, though, that like it's about the culture. It really is. And it's fascinating to me how in this industry, in some cases, there's been a lot of maturity, and I think we've moved forward, but we still have, people, co-founders, founders that have a lot of hands in the kitty and are, around doing everything. And they're not as security focused as security professionals. And so they're then making the decisions on how many people to have, and they might talk a really good game.
There are, and I can't tell you how many times I've had recruiters reach out, to see if I'm interested or if I know anybody, and they're looking for a CISO or a head of security. So, many times, just give me the job description. I'll see if I have anybody in my network. And then when I start to unpack is you're not looking for a CISO. You're looking for a security engineer to give the title of a CISO, to give this performative security theater to the industry that you have a CISO, you have a head of security. But when you look at that individual's background and you look at who you're trying to hire, it's literally an individual contributor who has a very small subsection of experience in Web3 smart contract security. They have no experience building out an actual program. They've never run an incident response. They've never dealt with a breach. They don't understand what it's like to build a program, but yet they're taking individuals, they're putting them in uncomfortable and, in some cases, like set up to fail by giving them these CISOs or head of security titles when they are not experienced for those roles.
Well, and so what do we do about this? Cry? No, maybe. But I think like talking about how to do due diligence and pointing out that it's a problem is like the first step is acknowledging that this is an issue and then working on things as a community and calling out when it's not happening. But the unfortunate part is often we're calling it out after the fact, like with what we're doing here, not during it. But I do think that these conversations are a good start. They're a way to help us look at this. But yeah, I think everything you said on your surprisingly short and calm rant, Dave, was accurate and good. Does anyone else have anything you want to add to anything about drift before we move on?
Maybe just a very short. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
For one other quick one related to it, just to mention, because I don't think we mentioned it yet. From what I see in the news, it was a 205 signing threshold. And so this goes back to that, how disciplined, how diligent are you actually being, what you're actually thinking about. Maybe that's okay when you're talking about smaller or, not material amounts of funds, but you're talking about $250 million worth of funds. Do you really want to depend on two people? And knowing the nature of what actually happened, that, there was social engineering, there was some kind of malware likely getting detonated on where they were doing the signing. That means they were probably using their day-to-day devices for the signing for that. So do you really want that low a threshold? Do you really want to use your day-to-day device? Like that whole combination of things goes together that I get it. I'm inferring. I don't know for sure, but it seems a lot like that sort of combination happened. And it goes exactly into what all of us have been saying about, the level of sort of like discipline, the level of carefulness, even thinking about doing like a real risk assessment when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to actually figure out, is this really proportional to that level of asset at risk?
Yeah. How critical is the wallet? So maybe this would be okay for a couple million, depending on, it sounds like a lot of money to me, but maybe for a company that's different. But when you're talking about this amount being held in one place to be able to move with two signers, yeah.
I think the other thing also is, I think as an industry, we have this gut reaction to like, oh, it was DPRK again. There's nothing we can do. Like that really is not a great answer as well. If you dissect everything that happened, there were tons and tons and tons of controls that could have been put in place to prevent these types of hacks. Listen, if it was that doable, you'd see DPRK hacking, GSIBs and banks. Like they're not. Like they're intentionally focusing on these organizations that have hundreds and if not billions of dollars that have the same security posture of like a nonprofit. Like there is not a lot of time, money, or resources being put into the security budgets. So this isn't oh no, it's DPRK in North Korea and we're not going to be able to withstand these sophisticated nation state types of attacks. We have to be able to, and there are things that we can do that they're just not being done.
Yeah, I think on top of that, it's a relatively new technology, right? So there is a lack of awareness, or the company just thinks, okay, we have SOC 2, right? And maybe that's enough. But this is exactly where CCSS comes into play, because being maybe SOC 2 certified doesn't give you anything. And I see very much parallels with credit cards in the early days, how much fraud there was, right? Until PCI DSS standards came on EMV chips or 3D secure. It took time, and I think for the whole industry, which is like dealing with DLT, it needs like this painful experience of losing money, and until some standards get established, for instance, CCSS, right, that become like this base layer that everyone can follow. But until then, I think we will still see quite a few hacks. And well, not sure, David, you've been at Halborn, right? The things that you see, like also at like institutional level clients, it's just horrific, like basic stuff that is missing. And I think, yeah, awareness. I think it's also one of the keys.
Val, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just a small comment to David. You mentioned about LinkedIn and the fact that, yeah, sometimes you go and look at the companies and how many security, responsible people working there. So the side effect of this, like when those companies experienced hack, you will see a lot of hiring for the security positions. The same company will raise on LinkedIn, like, tens of people. They wanted everyone, like, security testers, engineers, CISO, security governance, etc., etc. So yeah, it's always like that. I mean, once you experience the problem, the real incident, then you start thinking critically. Other than that, like, all these security standards and controls looks like an obstacles to your business mission, not just thing that will help you, but just more to prevent you. That's why, yeah, we have this.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. I think that once you've got the pressure to do something, you're more likely to, especially if it's been like this public hack that people are now associating, like right now, and maybe less so, but when you say drift protocol, people are thinking about this. I would think most people are now. So another point that somebody brought up is like, it's not just one control. It's often many, many things. So we're missing a lot of different controls. And I think it goes back to the risk assessment, threat modeling, a lot of things that we've talked about. But it's sad when we do what we need to do after. It's like, healthcare. If you don't take care of yourself and then something suddenly bad happens, you look back and you're like, why have I not been doing this for 20, 40, 60 years? But at that point, it's already been done. And maybe you can do some things to recover and improve, but you would be much better off if you had started, building the muscles of security controls. Okay, so I'd love to change gears just a little bit. So we've been talking about social engineering, but I think kind of the underlying thing about this is trust, I guess, trusting what you see, what you hear, who you're working with, and just accepting that there is this layer of trust that maybe shouldn't exist. And I want to talk one more social engineering thing, but from a different perspective. So rather than like the enterprise angle, just if anyone is listening and holds crypto, I think this is a good hack to just be aware of real quick. So the Ledger app recently on Apple Store was showing a lot of people downloaded this app. It was not actually from Ledger. And so then people were adding or putting their seed phrases into this app and it was stolen. So we are talking about victims that are part of like a bigger enterprise, like what happened with Drift Protocol and how it impacts them. But then there's also like those one-offs with people who there's also this social engineering sort of happening on the back end where you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to download this app. So from a personal perspective, what can people do to avoid this type of thing? Because most of us use the App Store.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, and I might get yelled at from the other panelists and from the broader community because I know there's not your keys, not your keys, not your coins, and self custody, and all of that wonderful stuff. And I don't disagree with it principally. However, if you are, and I'm not knocking anybody that gets tricked by these things, if you're susceptible to these types of hacks and you are going to be tricked, then outsource your security to a custodian and park your funds where they're going to be doing a lot more than you're able to do yourself. So whether you're using like a Coinbase or a Robinhood or any of the other, custodial type of solutions, yes, you don't actually technically own the crypto. It's an IOU from the exchange, but just like you're trusting a bank with your cash, I would tell for these types of folks that are susceptible, put it with a custodian, especially ones that, have gone through the CCSS and, you can actually validate that they're following certain controls. So like that would be my recommendation, not a here's how to validate and here's how to do this and now become a security expert and, do your own security. Just outsource your security to somebody who's, following a certain approved framework.
I totally agree. I've always talked about, self-custody, not your keys, not your coins. But if you don't have the understanding of how to actually secure it, it's not more secure with you. I also think that we've had a lot of conversations on live streams about self-custody and how valuable that is in terms of your keys, your coins. But the wrench attacks that keep happening, the $5 wrench attacks, it's changing a lot of people's minds on self-custody.
Yeah, and just like one last point, it's not all or nothing, right? Like just like I walk down the street with $100 cash in my wallet, I'm not going to be walking down the street with $5 million sitting in my wallet. Keep $100 in self-custody so you can play around with it. If you get robbed, it's only $100, and the rest of your money is sitting with the custodian. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
and honestly,
sorry.
Yeah, please. I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to say that you would think that looking at the number sits at somewhere around $10 million, I think. And you would think that these were companies or organizations, but these were like common people who were putting their retirement fund in. So, and these are not technically adept people. They need to have a custodian. Just driving your point forward. A famous band member got his crypto stolen like this.
It's easy to do. Yeah. Like I don't look at them and like, how could you possibly do this? I get why it happened. Yeah. It's like easy to understand why it happened if you don't understand all of the things that you should be doing. And I think that's common. Roman, were you going to say something as well?
Yeah, I think it's like from CCSS, a key management training, right? But for normal folks, because you also don't go like swimming to the deep end of the pool if you don't know how to swim, right? So there's like some basic know-how that is knowledge that is missing, because this is a really it's in essence complex technology, right? It's like you also don't like drive a car without a driving license. For instance, in this case, I would never input like a recovery phrase into a ledger app, for instance, because my ledger is my hardware. I only put it into the hardware. So this is like something so very basic that I don't know how some, without having the understanding, let's say, I can imagine that someone entering. But if you have like this basic understanding, you maybe have heard somewhere like never input your recovery phrase in any app. And for instance, you could have two wallets, as someone already mentioned. You could have like a really cold storage wallet sitting just on the paper in your safe, and then you have like just ledger with a couple $100 like play money. So you don't like put like 10 million and then input like this recovery phrase into an app that you just downloaded from the store. No matter how, even if it's a ledger, right? Maybe the ledger itself got, the ledger app got compromised, and a new app version got pushed with this changed logic where you input the phrase, right? So you cannot even trust that part of deployment of those apps in the App Store. So you need like to have also like this baseline security process in your own, and the more money you have in those ledgers, the more critical it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethan, were you gonna jump in?
Similar to what Roman was saying, there's a side of this. If you're going to get in a car and drive, usually you're taking some kind of lessons before you do it. And when you're talking about operating with your own keys, it's like Dave was saying too. if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know the basics, you're likely to make some kind of a gaffe or error, and it's a very unforgiving area. The fact that you're getting a hardware wallet and then trying to put the seed phrase into somewhere on the actual computer, it's completely the opposite of what the thing is meant for. Some other lenses on this though. In this case, it sounds like it was just a malicious lookalike app. What happens if the App Store on the Apple side gets hacked someday? If that somehow happens, what happens if Ledger gets breached in some way? And so it's through Ledger's official account that a malicious app gets pushed out. These sorts of things, you really want to think about these if you are handling this stuff yourself. And so when something's prompting for that, even if you did validate it's Ledger asking for it in their official app, you still need to have that sort of training and know-how. And so going to a custodian or finding someone to help simplify this for you, if you're not comfortable with taking on that kind of responsibility and obligation, it really does make more sense to to not just necessarily do it yourself. Seek out professional help with this stuff if you are going to. It's really worth asking these questions, making sure you understand the concept, making sure you understand the gotchas.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, agree with all. It's interesting when we're talking about a technology that's new to a lot of people, and then it's old methods for getting into people's wallets. So we've got this new tech, but old things happening. So the social engineering, phishing, this is not something new. And it's impacting people directly, like big companies, but also individuals, like with the fake ledger app situation, or what just happened with Bitcoin Depot and how it's connected to snail mail phishing. So we're using old technology, or people that are more comfortable with older technology that are trying to learn about new technology, and we're like using that to get them. And by I don't mean we, like we on this call, but we as humans are doing that. Okay, so let's see here. Let's talk about another, unless anyone had anything to say about the last couple we've talked about. Are we ready to move on to one of our many other hacks on our list?
Maybe
There's
just
two
one.
more. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, just
No,
one last
please.
comment. Like, as a conclusion, like, think about the zero trust approach to the fact that if you kind of experiencing this thing, like, okay, you have some money and you're going out for like in an old market where everybody's trying to kind of treat you, trying to cheat on you, trying to steal your money. So always, like, the people's behavior, the person's behavior should be always like suspicious, 100% suspicious. So don't trust anyone, even if you see, because the problem here is like, Apple usually very good at verifying the applications, like to be published on the Apple Store. It's kind of, it's a pain in the ass for the developers. So if you published, it means something. So Apple did some checks. So here, of course, they made a bit of mistake, or it was again a sophisticated attack just to trick Apple and to be published on the website on the App Store. So yeah, like, just a general comment for everyone. Like, if you go to the internet, like, feel like zero trust. Like, don't trust anyone. Be suspicious as much as possible, because it's literally everyone is trying to steal your money. That's it.
Yeah, I think like a similarity that like should resonate with people is like, pretend you have a gold bar. Where do you want to keep the gold bar? Do you want to keep it in a safety deposit box at a bank where they're taking care of the controls and the security and access to the vault? Or do you want to keep it in your house? If you're going to keep it in your house, then you have to be wary of who's coming in your house, who's coming out of your house, who has access to your house. Could be someone ringing your doorbell that's delivering food. Are they really here to deliver food? Like, if you are someone who has a background in physical security and this is what you do for a living, and you have your own security alarms and motion detectors and et cetera, and you want to take on the responsibility of keeping the gold bar in your house, and you're well apt to do that, great. You're someone who has no experience doing that at all, there's no reason why you keep a gold bar in your house. There's no different than crypto. It's a bare asset.
And that just happened, what you brought up, the delivering food as a ruse.
One other one that we sort of mentioned a couple times, but to say it in almost like in a different or more simplified way, really think about it if you're trying to put all your eggs in one basket. if you're gonna, hold crypto and, and do things with, really material assets to yourself or to your organization, do you really want it all in that one wallet or that one system? Really think about how connected things are. If you have two different kinds of systems, how much sort of correlation is there between them, or how much commonality is there between them? Are you operating both of them from the same device? Are you using the same vendor for, your hardware wallets, even if they're different? Some of those questions, they really make a big difference for how much you can separate if something does go wrong, that it doesn't bleed over into the other area. And that separation really can, it can make something the difference between being painful and catastrophic.
Yeah. And that gold bar, I mean, all of these, we think about the gold bar, right? Okay, so you don't want it in your house, so you've decided that you're going to trust somebody else with it. Well, do you just like pass somebody on the street and you're like, you look like a nice fella? Like, no, you should be doing due diligence. But if you walk in to a, brick and mortar building and they're wearing suits, maybe you're like, oh, okay, this is good. But does that actually mean that they don't leave the back door to their building open at night between 1:30 and 1:45? And, everyone in the area knows that. So how do we make sure that if we are trusting others with that gold bar, with our crypto, that we're making sure they're doing the things? Because then there's that lack of transparency. You can only control so much of it. So then we're putting trust into others. And sometimes I think that trust is warranted. And oftentimes it turns out that it's not. And you don't know that until it's too late, which is where the hack comes in. If we knew ahead of time that the gold bar was going to go missing, we would, of course, do something different. But it's that false sense of security that shouldn't really exist, but it seems to often. And I don't know if it's because things are shiny or there's just like the hope of getting more money from it, or what it is, a lack of knowledge, maybe all of the above. But it definitely continues to happen. All right. That was my rant. Okay. So I'm looking on our list, just so everyone watching knows, we have a very long list, and that's part of the problem, is there are so many different things to talk about. Should we talk about cow swap and DNS hijacking next? This happened in April. And so this is an example of, it was $1.3 million. And I think some people would kind of scoff at that amount, maybe not personally, but for like a protocol. But all of this adds up. It delegitimizes our industry and it's hurting real people. But so anybody want to jump in and explain this one, or do you want me to do an overview? Me? Okay. So, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I can give a brief overview. I'm not a web person, but I think Ethan was telling me about this, about how there's just a toggle that you need to push, and you can start your registry lock, which provides like an extra layer of security, extra layer of friction when you're trying to change your domains. So yeah, long story short, CowSwap didn't have this, and attackers forged documents and gained access to the registrar. They basically fooled the registrar, social engineered the registrar, and they cloned CowSwap's UI completely, and then that UI was linked to now the domain that they were controlling. And when users came on CowSwap, they saw a similar looking UI. And when they were told to sign transactions, they were basically signing token approvals on the attacker's address. And a good thing though was that CowSwap really, like, I think under 20 minutes, they could detect this attack. And which is why we are seeing a lower number in $1.3 million. But yeah, a toggle, like Ethan said last time we met, could have seen this.
So they had a good incident response to this.
Yep.
I mean, under 20 minutes, that's impressive. Yep. Ethan?
So what ended up actually getting abused had, very little to do with, the Web3 side. It's good old Web2, it's domain registrations, it's DNS records. And you're talking about there's a more strict level of locking, registry locking that you can do. I don't think all registrars even offer it or support it. Some of them will charge a lot of money for it. I'm also pretty sure there's at least one registrar out there that you can pay like $20 a month. And for a range of, top level domains, they'll turn on registry locking. And so it's one of those things you're talking about 1.3 million isn't 300 million, but also $20 a month, and you can't turn that on. That's one of those things. It's the penny wise pound foolish, or even just not even having any idea about where to invest that stuff, or even understanding what those risks are with those areas. And a big piece it goes back to is really pulling in that really serious professional help that's gonna have that keen eye for these things. Getting that comprehensive assessment done, getting somebody that's gone through this enough times, seen enough things go wrong, and letting them help guide you towards this stuff. Sometimes even if you know you need it, if you don't know where to get good pricing, you're still going to scoff at it. You might think it's super cheap, and then the first thing you get is an offer that's thousands of dollars, to do this thing, which still probably worth it if you're talking about you're directing people towards crypto transactions. It's just one of those sort of sad areas. Probably everybody on this call knows, lots of folks that are listening in probably know, and then it's still just a small minority of the technology folks out in the world that are working on Web3.
Yeah, and this goes back to also cost as well. There are the registrars that Web3 organizations use, and there are registrars that large regulated financial service organizations use. And there's a huge difference in price. Instead of $20 a month a year for a .com, they'll charge $600 or $1,200 per .com. And it comes with an entirely different set of ownership and responsibility and security controls around social engineering. So again, that drive towards cost savings and not understanding how to build things out properly. There's a big difference just in registrars. And again, I'm not knocking the use of certain registrars versus others, but when you're protecting hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, you really have to think through every single possible scenario and weigh the cost. And for an extra $600 or $1,200 a year to utilize some of these more, name brand registrars that have protections in place for these, I would do that. And then on the other side too, you should be monitoring your own infrastructure. So that way, you can immediately have an incident response plan, put out comms. Our TLD was just compromised. There are ways to, alert the public that there's something that's ongoing. Yes, I think it's great that they responded within 19 minutes. But there are things that could have been done to prevent it. And I'm sure there could have been 19 minutes could have been reduced to seconds in some respect once they saw that the IP addresses for that particular A record or C name, whatever they were using, got switched, and they could have had an alert procedure go out on comms on X or Twitter or whatever, alerting everybody. So 19 minutes is great. Could have easily been reduced to seconds.
Other sort of interesting related topic. If folks remember going back, I think it's like 2 or 3 years when Google sunset one of its domain registry services and automated moving things over to Squarespace. If folks hadn't actually set up their Squarespace accounts ahead of time, there was I think it was some kind of weakness in the system to move and basically sign up and set up your new account in Squarespace. That got abused. Multiple crypto organizations, the smaller ones, the ones that probably missed the email notifications or didn't take the time or have the time to look at this stuff, it went wrong there. These aren't the only cases of DNS related, or domain registration related issues either. So this is that thing. You're talking about a technology that's been around for decades. Some of these capabilities and some of these concepts and aspects are, nothing particularly interesting. It's just applying those really disciplined understandings of it and really being, careful, proportional to what you're doing.
And I mean, replacing the UI with malicious version. Was it Bybit last year? It wasn't DNS, right? But it was a JavaScript injection where the UI also changed and was showing another transactions as the user expected. So it's not just DNS, but maybe it's also with all the hype, as we mentioned, or Jessica mentioned before, would you trust your gold bar at some people in a suit on the street? I mean, this cow enterprise, how many people are there? Like 20, 30? It's a small shop. So you cannot expect them to do like deep threat modeling about everything that could happen. They might not even have resources for that or from deep monitoring, like stuff that maybe bigger players are able to pull off. But they start getting like this TVL, huge volumes, and what do you do? Because people don't look whether that company actually has security controls in place. This is also like where CCSS come into play, where you have this stamp of quality that some professionals really went in and looked with a magnifying glass and checked whether that company or that system is actually secure. But as soon as FOMO starts, everyone's like closes his mind and doesn't ask any questions.
Yeah, when you were just saying that, I was thinking, so okay, a team doesn't have the resources for security. Should they, are we saying like, oh, well, if you don't have the resources, then like that's okay? Or is it, if you don't have the resources, is it ethically irresponsible to knowingly be taking this gold bar? Like if I was walking down the street looking fancy and someone handed me a gold bar, I'd be like, what are you doing?
Yes, yes, definitely.
I am not a
there are a lot of people driving bicycles here in Germany, right? And bicycle theft is, well, it's common. So there's usually a rule of thumb that you should invest about 10% of the value of your bike into a lock. So if it costs like $2,000, your lock should cost at least $200, right? So maybe this is also like the same, even if it's not a requirement by policymakers. But still, if you manage this amount of money, this is the minimum that you should invest into security.
I agree. And I think part of the problem is on the crypto community too. So I'm going to kind of shine the light over at them. For everybody that's looking to squeeze out a couple extra bips, those bips are coming from someplace, and those extra bips are probably coming from lack of hiring or lack of controls. So this chase to earn extra yield and to get into these more exotic assets brings on more risk. So I don't think it's entirely the responsibility of the projects, although I do agree that it's unethical in some cases. I do think this chasing of yield has also led towards a lot of these corners getting cut.
Yeah, if people weren't trying to make money quick, then they wouldn't be doing that, right? If I didn't, like, back to the gold bar thing, if someone said, well, I'm going to give you $100 if you hold on to this, and then actually this analogy isn't good, but my point was we not only have that ethical responsibility, but people are like throwing money at these companies. So there's blame on both sides. And it's not even about blame. It's just like kind of disappointing too. In a lot of ways. Roman, what were you going to say? Were you going to?
Yeah, I think people were always chasing the quick buck. Remember the tulip crisis in the Netherlands? Like, it's been there for ages. You cannot change. You cannot change humanity in that regard, I think.
Yeah, I think it's human nature for sure. The bike example you gave reminded me of, we were just talking about this recently, years and years ago. My husband had a nice bike. I had like on $100 old, it was a Schwed, but it was like an old, not great bike. And we put them in a storage and somebody broke into the storage. They removed his nice, expensive bike and took mine, which was like literally $100 bike, but it was a common bike and they weren't going to get caught. So even though it wasn't as nice, they would be able to sell it or use it. And it was like, an old maroon bike, no one was going to look after it versus the other one. So I think there's also something to be said for, yeah, maybe you're making less money off of the theft, but it's easier to do it or easier to get away with. So sometimes these smaller companies are being targeted because they don't have the security in place. And not just that, but it's like an easier grab.
Did you get a better bike to match your husband's?
I got a worse bike because I'm cheap, but then eventually I got a better bike. So it worked out.
Another lens on that, when folks are taking that kind of risk, the bad outcome that happens if it gets stolen, there's a decent amount of that time it's going to things like terrorist financing. It's not like you're just taking a market risk and somebody on the other side in the market that's a legitimate organization gets those funds. It's literally going to somewhere where they're probably committing human rights violations, where they're probably building nuclear weapons, where they're probably doing something you really don't want to be funding. And so it's one of those things. Think really carefully about that, because that's the risk you're taking, and that it's really a societal, impact, not like a financial impact just to you. And it's something you can't really get back fully, in a lot of ways. you lose that money, it goes there, and it's doing that harm that you personally usually have nothing you can do to claw back that money or get back, other than like immediately like kind of freezing and seizing or that sort of thing. Once it's over there, you've done that to society, and it's somewhat irreversible.
The question for me is whether this kind of behavior should be left in the hands of the consumer or the projects, right? Or whether that should be regulated, because when money comes into play, you can expect like that everyone will follow some ethics and do what's best for humanity. But maybe there should be like strict but clear rules from the regulators, as if you handle this and this amount of volume or TDL, that you should follow strict procedures and actually certify that you're following those procedures.
But that's the regulation problem, right? A mindset problem here, because in the Web3 space, a lot of companies against the regulations as they are. I mean, there was the idea was, okay, eliminate the regulations as much as possible. Of course, when it was more like a fun or like, the very beginning of the era, that's fine. But now when it's serious money here, so it's basically, of course, like we see in Europe, a lot of regulations coming up. And of course, asking to have like a SOC 2 or ISO 27001 is just, yeah, it's good, but usually it doesn't mean anything, right? We all know it's just a paperwork mainly for the companies. Of course, when we talking about this specific hack, it's like, okay, how much money would the company spend to do a proper risk assessment? I mean, it's literally nothing, right? To hire a consultant or to hire a person who will do a proper technical risk assessment or threat modeling. And like, believe me, the DNS hijacking would be one of the top like high level risks that they will find against the domain, because it's like literally on the surface. And as Ethan said, like the cost of reducing the risk level to the appropriate is nothing. So it's basically all about the risks, to understanding, okay, what are the things that like on the surface and makes us vulnerable to the outside for the hackers that might be very easy to hack. So let's think about those basic stuff, the basic risks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're almost out of time, although I feel like we could probably all talk about this a lot more. Unsurprisingly to me, we got through like, I don't know, a third or quarter of our list. These are just 2026 recent, like Q2 2026, which is crazy. But so we'll definitely at some point do a follow-up on additional hacks that we didn't cover, perhaps some people on this call, perhaps some others, depending on scheduling. But this was a really productive call, I think, in terms of if you're listening, you've got some ideas of just kind of how vast the threat landscape is and how important it is to put resources into security so that we don't want to talk about your protocol or your wallet. I was thinking this morning how I really like these conversations, but I also hate them. Because it's sad and disappointing and frustrating and but also fascinating. So I guess there's both sides to it. But okay, so the details of the incidents we've talked about are different from one another, but similar in some ways and similar to others. And these attackers are often succeeding when the assumptions that are going unchallenged. Controls are breaking down. And so one of the best ways to improve security is to learn about the incidents that are happening and to prevent those yourself. So thanks for joining us today. I hope that you're leaving with some practical lessons that you can apply to either your own organization, project, or even your own personal security practices. So join us for our next session on this. And thank you so much to our panel of experts. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your brains with us. We couldn't do this without you. C4 exists on wonderful volunteers like you all. So appreciate you guys taking the time. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.